and welcome to The Content Bite, a podcast for freelancers who use their words to make money. I'm Rachel Smith, a freelance journalist, copywriter, and content producer. I'm also the founder of Rachel's List, a jobs board and community for Australian writers and other creatives.
And I'm Lynne Testoni. I'm a journalist and a content writer as well. Rachel and I are your weekly co-hosts, and every week we're bringing you all kinds of tips, tricks, and some fabulous guests to help you make the most of your freelance business. This podcast is sponsored by our good friends at Rounded, easy accounting and invoicing software made just for Australian freelancers and sole traders. It's everything you need to make freelancing easier. Find out more at rounded.com.au.
Also, if you're a gold member of Rachel's List, Rounded is giving you 20% off an annual subscription plan. Upgrade to gold membership for all the details.
Hi, Rach. How are you holding up in the house of COVID?
Yes, not very well, but we've got a few days left to go on the isolation. So fingers crossed I make it through without actually catching it. That's my plan.
Oh, yes, you just hang in there. But it is nice. One of the nice things is you've got the podcast to look forward to. And
Yes.
We've got another fabulous guest this week, Marcus Bowles. And we both heard Marcus speak at the recent Launceston Freelance Festival. And it was so interesting. His talk was so good. We thought it'd be great to share his insights on the podcast with our audience.
That's right. He was really impressive and I have a lot of questions for him. Before we get Marcus in the hot seat, let's just read his bio. Dr. Marcus Bowles is founder and chair of the Institute for Working Futures and director of Capability Co. for over 30 years. Marcus has successfully delivered more than 280 major consultancies, undertaking strategic foresighting and research into workforce capabilities that make people and organisations more agile and future ready. Marcus has an extensive list of books, journals, and publications. He's held academic appointments as director and retains honorary professorial appointments at the University of Tasmania and Macquarie University, which happens to be my university many moons ago. Since 1998, his research has led to ed tech startups that have obtained commercial success and global awards. Marcus is also a board member of Engineering Education Australia and chairs 3 leading technology and educational companies. Marcus, when do you sleep?
Thank you so much. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. And yes, it is a lot of mouthful when you read it all out, isn't it?
It's quite a weird thing to hear your bio read out, I think.
Yeah,
yes.
Definitely.
It's an amazing career, Marcus, though. Tell us a bit about how you started and what you're doing now.
More great careers start doing one thing and by accident you end up doing something else that if you're very lucky you're passionate about. So I found out that I wasn't as passionate about being in the army or necessarily working in government as I thought I would be, and ended up pursuing a career that was really about the future, playing in spaces where it was really about creating more certainty around what people wanted to do and helping large organisations. I found that also shared the problem of actually finding the right people for the jobs that were coming rather than the jobs that existed today.
Oh, that's interesting.
I love that. So what really interests you about working in that space, about the future of work, and where do you see the job market headed? I know you touched on that in Launceston, but...
Look, the future never arrives. So you're always moving towards something that you don't achieve. But I think the whole idea today that we can accept, particularly since the pandemic, is that the idea that you have a static world and you have a single career, and we can say those things, and I've been saying them for probably 25 years, it really now resonates with a lot more people. If you look at the workforces today, over 40% of people are saying in every survey we take in Australia or New Zealand that they would like to leave or will leave their job within the next year. And the reason for that is a lot of people now can understand that with severe shortages out there in many areas, that why would you work in a job where you're not fulfilled and you're not getting paid well, or you're not getting treated well by your leaders? And you can actually find a better place, or you can actually work for yourself. I think there's a lot of people really seriously not only changing their geographic location, but they're changing their mindset about how they want to work.
It is interesting. I mean, most of our listeners are freelancers or they run the small business, so they work for themselves. Do you think, maybe it's one of my passions, but I see more and more people going to what I call a portfolio career. I think we used to call them slashies, you know. Do you think that's the way of the future with freelancing and portfolio careers?
I could put it even more bluntly, Lynne. I think that the freelance and the portfolio of employers that are paying you for your expertise is the future of work.
Yeah.
It literally is the design of work, and that with such shortages now, people have come to realize in large organizations and in global organizations in particular, that you need the best talent whenever you can get it. And you can't afford to always employ it full time. And in flip side of that is that people don't want to work for the same employer with the same conditions and the same restrictions all the time. So if you can actually sell yourself and achieve more and get better work-life balance doing things like freelance work, then many people are opting for that. Some with complete ignorance and some just because they're completely peeved with the current employment arrangements.
True.
That is very true. I love what you say about how companies are becoming more agreeable to this idea of plugging in a freelancer when they need them instead of feeling like they have to have that bum on a seat all the time. And that's what we always talk about at Rachel's List, you know, educating companies that is a way to really get the talent they need temporarily and then move on. And it's so great for freelancers to have those opportunities. And how can we sort of future-proof ourselves and our careers?
Just following on from what you said as well, I mean, future-proofing really is understanding that you're not necessarily preparing yourself for a job in a vertical career where the job you're in leads to the job that naturally sits above it. You have capabilities well beyond that job that you have, that you get from life and experience. And I think our biggest problem has been that we put people into jobs and straitjackets of occupational careers. Those things do not exist where I'm creating workforces in the future. We're creating workforces where jobs aren't coming from the classified, government list in the ABS and all the rest of it. We're taking a part of a job out of one industry area and merging it with another, both because those jobs have components that have been automated and there's no longer a full job there, but it's also because we need people with, let's use a contextual example, we need people with writing and journalism and creative skills in health. We need that merged with marketing. We need it merged with, stakeholder engagement and how we do consultation. So I think that the old idea that jobs sit in occupations that sit in industries has really been destroyed. So future-proofing yourself first is actually thinking outside what you've been taught to think, that when you introduce yourself, you say what your job is. Actually think about what you're really good at and what you really want to do. And that's the first thing about future-proofing yourself.
It's a totally different mindset, isn't it?
Completely. And it's really looking at, and I know this sounds trite, but we set up a company called Capability Co 4 years ago, and of course it's boomed during the pandemic. And we're working with Telstra, co-creating their future workforce. And amazing people at Telstra, and they've realised two things, which we've already talked about. First is that it's not necessary for everyone to come into the office every day.
Yep.
And the second thing is that you're actually getting a better quality of relationship where the well-being of the person is considered within the employment arrangement. And so they're actually looking at developing a whole person well beyond the job. They're interested in the human capabilities that each person has and developing them for a role that might not even be with Telstra. But the opportunity is there to actually, if you know what they're good at, to create roles and actually find people in your own workforce that you didn't even know you needed until you created that new role.
It's fascinating.
It is fascinating. I think also you're talking about there's that flexibility and thinking differently. At the Freelance Festival, you talked a lot about micro qualifications as a way of sort of, I guess, equipping yourself for some of these sort of more lateral things. Do you want to share your thoughts about that with our audience?
Yeah, so a micro qualification, it's a micro credential. So a micro credential is part of a macro credential. The macro credential is the qualification. So we in education have always delivered undergraduate, postgraduate degrees and vocational courses, and even in schools now, we can break up courses into little components. But what's happened is we've had the massive online open courses that are available, the free courses and all the rest of it. And there's booming short courses everywhere, particularly during COVID, all online, learn something, consume it. Every time it was completed, you got a badge, a digital badge that you could share with everyone. And as a case in point, I know an employer that had someone come to them for a job and they said, oh, look, I've got 8 digital badges, micro credentials that are in the area that you need me. None were micro credentials. They were all just digital badges that you could get. There was no comparable value to them. There was no standard. So micro credentials are in actual fact where we are educating someone to a standard
Yep.
of proficiency. And what we're doing with our employers is, because the workforce is changing so quickly and we need so many new people in new skill areas, we often don't have time, and we would encourage, and people will hate this, but we're encouraging people to get into work before they do a qualification.
Oh, okay.
Where we're taking non-traditional pathways to get people out of areas where they would never have considered going immediately to university in the first place, or necessarily becoming a tradie, but they might love gaming, or they might love creativity, or they might love customers. But we find out what they love, and then we actually put them on pathways where they're earning and learning these micro-credentials. So they earn a micro-credential in this world by informal learning and applied capability. You have to apply the capability to the standard, and the standard is rigorously applied. So when you get the credential, you get a credit and a qualification in a university.
Oh, I see.
So you're learning and earning 40 and 50,000, and you earn a stack of credentials. You're probably now earning 100,000, and you can go and get the rest of the 1/3 or 2/3 of the degree.
Mm-hmm.
So that this means for many young people, it's a much better option for them to get into work. But for employers who want people with particular skills and can't get them from their graduates, or there's not enough graduates, that first point was really about universities not responding to this market.
Yes.
We need to actually get people into work and to do it in a different way. So micro-credentials are not just about universities unpackaging what they've got. It's about employers and professional bodies in particular hauling universities over the coals and trying to get them to deliver a different product in a much better way. And if they won't do that, then doing it themselves.
That is so fantastic. I love that idea of being able to cherry pick your credentials rather than that, really old school formal learning where you have to go and do the whole degree and 2/3 of it isn't relevant to you. And I remember when I was at university, I knocked on some doors so that I could do specific courses that were specific to what I wanted to do, even though I wasn't in that degree. And often they would say yes and just let me do a semester of feature writing or a semester of something. That really catapulted me into my career. So I was sort of trying to do it then, but it wasn't set up. Is that something that universities are still grappling with and setting up, or is that available now where we could dive in and do those micro credentials for different subjects?
We're really fortunate. There's been a number of universities in Australia that have led the way globally on micro credentials, and they've really stretched it, and we've had a pretty advanced approach. But globally, there's probably more advanced approaches that are really focused on what we call the new collar, the digital workforce, and the green collar, which is this green, sustainable workforce. These are all where we're creating 80% of all the new jobs that have been created are being created in jobs that haven't existed before.
Yeah.
And where we're losing jobs from the labour market, we're losing jobs in the traditional areas. So we've got this shift where we've got an old workforce that needs to move to new areas of work, and a new workforce that's going to be coming in, where a lot of the opportunities and highest pay won't be in those traditional qualifications. And the universities, if they're going to play a really valuable role because they're knowledge-based, they're far more responsive than a lot of the technical and vocational areas in being able to repackage education that then follows these career pathways. So that we have a lot of work going on in universities in Australia. A lot of the best work, though, has been done internationally in terms of the relevance of some of those micro-credentials. But we're moving really quickly now that we've got employers who actually are understanding that they don't have to buy a full qualification necessarily. And I would hope we're also starting to see some of the unions realising as well that tying careers to qualifications is actually cutting a lot of young people, particularly, out of the opportunities in the workforce. And you can pick the qualifications up later, but you can't pick up the skills and the opportunity. The opportunity is there now. And for the next 3 years, the massive shortage, we've got nearly, the last time I saw it, we've got around about 320,000 less workers available than we need in Australia in the labour market.
So when you talk about these micro credentials, are you talking about sort of like a website platform, like a technical skill, or are you talking about a different way of thinking? So it might be learning how to negotiate or managing staff. Or how does that, can I get down to like the detail of what a micro credential is?
So my company, Institute for Working Futures, has spent 25 years researching one of the most important skills for the future. And we did a lot of work with Deakin University and helped them with their micro-credential, their professional credential framework. And then we moved in to work with major organisations. So we have what we call a human capability standards framework. So we actually have identified 10 essential capabilities for the future. And they each span from entry level all the way up to the highest level of work, 7 levels of work, which also matches against the Australian qualifications framework. And by the way that we've designed them, they also match against how employers mostly structure their workforces. So you can lead a person to a level of proficiency in work that also equates to a level of qualification.
Yeah.
And so then the universities can start to work on both technical and non-technical. So we're in the non-technical area with the human ones, but we also have things in the areas like leadership and risk and project management and creativity, where there's, and future thinking, where there's packages of credentials. Remember I talked about those stacks where you need to have a certain set of credentials to then be really employable and fast track your career. So we have a lot of those that we've worked on, and you need technical ones to match them. So the big ones, if you're looking at huge employment opportunities, obviously you need some of the human, but you would then match them with, say, a university partner who can then deliver the cybersecurity or the data analytics or the architecture or the customer experience or the creative or the sales. And so there's this beautiful relationship starting to emerge where working with our university partners, they've also learned where the market's going and starting to import back into their curricula the packages that they actually need to have in their courses so that people can be more employable.
So real world sort of experience feeding back into universities.
Yeah, I mean, and I'll say it with great respect in the fact that I am an academic when industry see me, and I'm an industry person when academics see me. But as long as you're working with a university that's prepared to be humble and actually know that they don't know, and actually realize that learning isn't just formal learning that occurs throughout the life. If you can get over those hurdles, which for 80% of the universities in Australia at the moment and the people you talk to is incredibly difficult, then you're working with amazing universities and people who actually realize they're there to serve a purpose, which is both develop the individual and the whole individual, but also make sure that person has invested in something that will get them real outcomes. And the idea many would pursue that it's all about esoteric growth and relationships. Love that, agree with that. But the reality is today, a lot of people, particularly in lower socioeconomic and regional areas, can't invest in things that don't actually pay them back.
Yeah, fair enough. You also, in your talk, you also talked about the rise of creative camps and how it's changing that sort of world of formal qualifications and that a move towards informal learning. Why is this exciting, especially for writers? We'd love to know about that.
So this idea is really where you'll find in particularly year 10 to 12, if you're working in schools, and this is where they're really prevalent, they'll run 5-day camps on music, on creativity, but also on coding camps, hackathons, startup garage, and all these things. What we're doing is actually formally wrapping micro-credentials around that learning, actually giving it a real structure and asking it to be assessed. That learning very rarely gets recognised in the national curricula, and it's very rarely recognised so that the person can get a credit in a university qualification or an employer can know what it's worth. So we do all three. So we're actually putting a structure around it and working with major universities, particularly in Queensland, ones that many people wouldn't know about, but are very well known in the schools community, like Beenleigh and others who, again, have students who don't go on to university, but they're streamed into courses that either lead to a university or a cliff. So what we're doing is actually giving them an opportunity to say, hey, I think I want to be a writer. Let's go and do a creative writing camp. And while it doesn't exist now, we would see that we would actually wrap some human capability credentials around it, collaboration, communication, and probably add a technical one relating to writing or storytelling, digital storytelling.
Yeah.
And we'd actually give them credentials so they complete it in school, have an outcome they can put on all of their CV and also on if they have one LinkedIn or Facebook or wherever. But more importantly, it carries, two of those will carry a 2-subject credit in a university undergraduate degree. Even if they don't go to university, at school, they're now getting a taste of learning that is informal but structured and can lead to a career and a university pathway if you wanted to take it.
Interesting. Wow. You touched a little while ago about these informal online learning courses that you can do that give you the badge, but they're not standardized and that sort of thing. But it's something in the freelance world that we see a lot of. We see a lot of incredible courses coming through that may not be affiliated with universities, but are so useful for the freelancers that we know and might catapult them into a much higher earning bracket, give them really incredible skills that they can't get at a university. What's your view on those sorts of courses?
They're essential.
Yeah.
So what you're doing is you're actually, because you're at the coalface, you know what's required. The difference is you may not have a professional body that can formally make sure that what that learning is doing can be to a standard. In other words, a level of work or a level of qualifications. Remember, I talked about human capability standards. As an example, I had someone who came to me 2 weeks ago, and they had a wonderful course that was actually being completed by about 8,000 people. They don't give any recognition. They wanted to give a micro-credential. The best they could do was a digital badge. There was no way what they did was being assessed to a standard that could get a credit in a university qualification. But we do what we call an assurance services. So this is what Capability Co does as well. We've set it up so that we realize that there's going to be better courses out there or things that people have got, and actually make sure the course then leads to an assessment where it can be assured that the person has reached the standard. Then they can actually get the micro-credential. So the thing is to take that extra bit of organizational step and start to build relationships with people who can actually recognize it and issue credentials. What Working Futures Human Capability Standards do is every credential that's issued at every level actually carries a credit within a university qualification.
Oh, that's impressive.
So we already have the university relations that assure that. We just have to assure that however the person got there is to the standards that's expected, and that's where all of the rigor is really in. So fantastic, you've got those courses. Start talking to universities or start talking to organizations that can help you assure the standard is to the requirements that can get a credit in a university qualification.
That's really useful for so many freelancers who run those courses, isn't it, Lynne?
Yeah, it is really interesting.
Yeah.
We see a lot of really practical courses, but of course there are a lot of amazing ones, but there's also a few cowboys out there, and it's hard to work out which ones are which until you do it.
And what to spend your money on, I guess.
And that's the difference between badging and credentialing. The credentialing really says there's an overlay of rigor. And ideally with a professional body that's looked at it and actually says this is an important part of professional skills for the future.
Yeah. So if you are a writer or a freelancer, like most of our audience members, what sort of qualifications do you think that they should be looking into?
So if we're talking about the full qualifications, I think it's really difficult to say in your field. I think the area at the moment, if you look where people are making money, and the vloggers and the bloggers and the people who are doing the communication really with the people in marketing, linking with the big areas in business, that's where the activities are. I don't think you need a full qualification. I think you need a rigorous learning that can actually put structure around what you do to make sure you're doing it to a standard. But you're probably better off doing a shorter course in the areas that are the technical skills relating to the web or to digital or to data or to business or to marketing, and then add the other component that you're really strong at. So I think that there's certainly very good journalism degrees out there and writing and editing courses. My problem with that is that they're all targeting old traditional jobs that are going.
Yeah.
Yes.
So 100% of the degree isn't focused at 100% of the opportunity. Probably 10 to 20% of that degree is really relevant to the future. And I think if you can package that 10 to 20% with the really solid understanding of where work's going and where you want to work, then look for multiple employers. Become a specialist in digital storytelling or in the communication of messages to stakeholders inside an organization. Those are the big niches that are emerging.
Amazing. What sort of mistakes do you see companies making, or where do companies need to be educated in where the future of work is going and dealing with freelancers, and especially creative freelancers, I suppose?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really big...
Yeah.
Let me start from what I learned when I was in the freelance festival and talking in Launceston. I was stunned at just how poorly you're paid.
Right.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe someone was telling me you're paid by word, and if you did 30,000 words and they only publish 3, you get paid for 3,000. And I'm thinking, there's no one else I know would pay on a piece rate for a modern job. And if that's the working arrangements, I would actually be using the platforms like you have, Rach, to in actual fact broker to a different audience that actually pays for what you're worth and pays for what you do.
That is our mantra, we have to say.
And that's not all companies do that, but there are, like we said, some publishers out there that will do that. It's so highly unethical, but it's not across the board by any means. Yeah.
The other one I'd say is I was amazed at how much perceived and obviously voiced gender bias there was in the industry, and that the people who became very senior leaders often were male, and that wasn't representative of the whole of the industry. So what I was hearing, and I know that's probably not what you're asking me, but what I'm hearing is a very old designed industry. It's an industry that really is in that rust belt of things that are going out backwards, like the printers and the journalism
Yes.
occupations. And I think that we need to understand that there's a transition that goes on. And it's not for me to say, and I haven't done the research, but we're designing roles in other industries that use the capabilities that you have that would pay more and be part of other industry areas. So my first thing would be saying is that employers need to understand there's going to be competition for skills that they don't think are really valuable in their own industry that you work within. That there are other industries that think they're incredibly valuable, as long as you can work in the digital media, as long as you can work within the space that's going to be about industry and business and what they're trying to achieve in the future, or in the space where we're trying to engage customers in different ways. So there's a different mindset, a different way of looking at what you're doing, but the same core skills.
We're seeing that a lot with things like UX copywriting. We just had a masterclass on that, and we also had Susan Rioch on the podcast, who talked a lot about that, which is a really different, it's kind of that intersection, isn't it, between what businesses are trying to achieve and using creative skills to meet those goals. But there's lots of opportunities like that, I imagine, that you would know about as well in the digital space.
Yeah, look, I mean, there's an alphabet soup of, that's exactly what you just said. But if you know the relationship between UX, UI, and CX, there's a study list for people to go away with. If you understand it's a hierarchy and that the greatest outcome is in actual fact an engaged customer, and you can write and tell stories in the digital space or on media materials that actually promote that, or work in a team where they have no media or communication experience and they need to get that message across, that's a major, huge opportunity area for you to be working.
Yeah. I sometimes think that journalists and writers underestimate themselves. I certainly see that. And I do know that when I moved from journalism into a corporate environment, I was quite unprepared for how good my writing skills were compared to everybody else. Having worked with a literate sort of people who are really good with words, working in a corporate thing and realizing how important those skills were and how valued they were, which they hadn't been before. It's interesting, isn't it? So one of the things we do is we ask a lot of our guests about tech tips, because I think it's all about learning and, adding to that portfolio of skills. Are there any useful digital tools that you use and you'd recommend?
Geez, I think I work in the future space. I'm probably a Luddite. No, but I mean, in the sense that you get to a point when there's lots of technologies that want you to collaborate on so many different platforms, and the more customers and clients that you have, remember that portfolio of work.
Yeah.
You need to be really careful about how much of your time you make available to everyone. So the things you probably need to be able to do, and particularly if you're in communication, to actually work in critical project roles, there's probably the O's, the Trello, the Jiro, and the Miro. So Trello, Jiro, Miro. They're really about project management tools and how you actually interact and work with others, and the communication management side of that, but also getting a communication messaging for project changes is a critical area where your writing skills are absolutely missing. The other ones I'd say are the broad ones, which everyone probably know about. Teams is much more important than people want it to be, or it should be perhaps. It's chewing into everything. It sits behind a secure firewall. You need to know how to use it.
Yep.
And Asana. If they're not using Teams, they're probably using Asana. And then you've got the suite of things, which I think most people would know about, particularly Slack and Zoom, increasingly if you're not using a Teams environment. So the only other one I'd throw in there, if you didn't know anything about it, is Zendesk, particularly working in customer environments and then following through on help desk and follow-up communication and strategizing around that. Those would be the only ones. And it's not the ones that your listeners probably would have in terms of the things that are directly related to them. It's the things that you need to be able to do if you're going to work in a project or team environment, which is about that contracting environment that we're talking about.
Wow, fantastic. Marcus, thank you so much for sharing all your experience and your thoughts on the future of work. I think what has really, the big takeaway for me in our talk today is really about how journalists and creative people can think laterally about where else they might fit in that future. And it's just so inspiring and really fascinating. So thank you.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I think it makes us all think about our skills and our value and how we can use that bring value and sort of to bigger businesses or different careers. And
absolutely,
we all want to be still working in 5, 10, 15 years. So that's the thing.
Yes. So thank you, Marcus. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And thanks again to our sponsors, rounded.com.au, easy accounting and invoicing software made just for Australian freelancers and sole traders.
And we'll have show notes in your podcast app. And so head there to find out more about where you can connect with Marcus.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.